Chapter 1. The billionaire, the sangria, and the smart-mouth designer Selene Thorne never believed in fate. Until the night she spilled sangria on a ruthless billionaire alpha, insulted him to his face, and accidentally signed herself into a 1-year supernatural marriage contract before midnight. It all started with a glittery lie and a dress 2 sizes too tight. She'd borrowed the gown from her cousin Juno, who swore it was haute couture and not even cursed anymore. It shimmered with rose gold threads and clung to Selene like a second skin, or like punishment. The heels were high enough to qualify as weapons, and her hair had betrayed her halfway through the updo process and now looked like feral but make it fashion. But none of that mattered. What mattered was, Selene did not belong here. The grand supernatural gala was held once a year in the crystal-domed ballroom of the Celestian Tower, a place so elite, so terrifyingly shiny, that even the walls had security clearance. The air buzzed with magic and money. Wares, witches, fey nobles, vampire lords, and shifter packs mingled in silks and power, sipping enchanted cocktails and pretending they didn't secretly want to maul each other. Selene was here for one reason. She needed a job, a freelance design gig, a contract, a miracle. So naturally she ended up ruining the night of the most dangerous alpha on the continent. It was supposed to be simple. Charm the right investor, pitch her interior design brand, Luna and Thorn, spaces that shift, avoid drunk vampires, don't get cursed. But then she saw him. At first she didn't even know who he was, just that he stood near the bar like he owned the air around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, black-tailored suit that hugged his form like he was sculpted straight into it. His tie looked criminally expensive. His hair was jet black, slicked back with a single disobedient strand curling by his temple. And his eyes, when they flicked up and met hers, were not human. Wolf. Alpha. Dark and calculating, with a hint of disdain, like he was already bored of this whole city, this party, and possibly existence itself. Selene told herself to look away, walk away, don't antagonize the apex predator in the room, but of course her mouth had other plans. She marched up to the bar next to him, ordered the strongest sangria they had, and caught him staring again. "What?" she snapped. He blinked once, slowly, like he hadn't expected a challenge. "You're not Pack." "Nope," she said, lifting her drink. "Just a human. Don't worry, I'm housebroken." He stared. "Then you don't belong here." Selene arched a brow, funny. "That's exactly what I was thinking, about you." There was a hush around them. A few heads turned. A vampire choked on his martini. The alpha's gaze sharpened. "Do you know who I am? Let me guess. Alpha McGrumpface?" He took a slow, deliberate step closer. Selene suddenly realized how tall he was, how still he held himself, like a storm paused mid-strike. A dangerous calm. "Alaric Vexwood," he said softly, "Alpha of the Vexwood Pack, CEO of Vexwood Industries, and soon to be bonded in alliance marriage, if I don't kill someone first." Selene blinked. "Cool. So you're rich, furry, and cranky." Before she could stop herself, she tripped on the hem of the cursed dress, and her sangria went flying, right down his pristine, silver-threaded, clearly custom Armani suit. Time slowed. The glass hit the floor with a delicate tink. The red liquid bloomed across his chest like a bloodstain. Selene froze. Alaric stared down at the damage, then at her, as though mentally calculating how many witnesses were in the room. "You have 5 seconds," he said coldly, "to explain yourself." She cleared her throat. "I was aiming for your drink. But I guess fate likes to improvise." 3 seconds. "I could lick it off," she offered sweetly. That stopped him. His nostrils flared. For a single, horrifying second, Selene swore she saw his pupils slit, Wolf taking over. The energy around him turned molten, heavy, almost feral, and then he turned away. "Follow me," he growled. "Wait, what?" "You owe me. I owe you dry cleaning, maybe. Now." He didn't wait, just walked off into the private corridors like he expected the world to obey him. Selene had 2 choices, run for the exit like a sane person, or follow the dangerously hot, definitely unstable alpha billionaire into a dark hallway during a magical gala. Naturally, she followed, because Selene Thorne had never claimed to be sane, and fate, it seemed, had plans. Big, stupid, dangerous plans. The hallway was colder. Selene followed the alpha billionaire through a gleaming obsidian corridor lit by wall sconces made of glowing quartz. Everything about this place screamed wealth and ancient magic, like if a Bond villain and an elven architect had a baby and handed it a black Amex. Alaric Vexwood's footsteps echoed like judgments. His presence filled the narrow hall even when he wasn't speaking. Broad back, midnight black suit drenched in sangria. Not a single hair out of place despite the wet fabric clinging to his shoulders like revenge. "Where are we going?" Selene asked, trying to keep up in her criminally tall heels. "Because if this is where you murder me in cold supernatural blood, I feel like I deserve a drink first." "Silence," he said without turning. Selene scowled. "Right. Charming and commanding. You're like a Pinterest board for toxic red flags." He stopped so suddenly she almost barreled into his back. He turned to her, gaze burning. "Stop talking." "I physically cannot." A twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smirk, more like a muscle spasm born of deep spiritual irritation. Then, finally, he opened a door. Wide, heavy, enchanted. Selene stepped inside and immediately forgot how to breathe. It was a private negotiation room, she realized, used for supernatural contracts, blood pacts, mating bonds, and high-value alliances. The air buzzed with residual energy. A huge obsidian table sat at the center, glowing softly with shifting runes. A set of parchment scrolls glowed faintly on the tabletop, held down by a sleek black pen. "I'm not going to murder you," Alaric said, closing the door behind them. "Tempting as it is." Selene placed her hands on her hips. "You dragged me in here like you're about to perform an exorcism." "I brought you here," he corrected, "because the supernatural press is already buzzing with what they saw. An unknown woman, human, throwing wine on me, arguing, challenging me, in public." He stalked past her and dropped a folder onto the table. "Do you know what that looks like to the rest of the room? Like you have terrible luck? It looks like a mating challenge." Selene blinked. "Excuse me?" Alaric leaned against the table, folding his arms. His sleeves stuck slightly to his skin where the sangria had dried. His forearms corded with muscle, a vein twitching at the edge of his wrist. His scent, earthy, dark pine and something feral, wrapped around her senses before she could fight it. Selene cleared her throat and took a cautious step back. "Let me get this straight. I spill sangria, sass you a little, and now we're, what, supernaturally dating?" "Not dating, bound." He said the word like a curse. "The rules of supernatural diplomacy are clear. You humiliated an alpha in public, you touched him physically in front of witnesses, and now the council is demanding a formal response." Selene stared. And then, she laughed. "Oh no, 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 no. You think I'm going to sign some kind of magical leash because your ego got red-wined?" Alaric said nothing. Instead, he pushed the folder across the table. Inside, a contract. Elegant, clear, legally binding under both supernatural and human law. At the top, it read, "Mutual Alliance Pact via temporary matrimonial bond. Alaric Vexwood and Selene Thorn." She gaped at it. "This is insane." He walked around the table, voice even. "You'll be compensated generously. You'll live in my estate, appear with me in public, attend events, give the illusion that you are my chosen mate, and that I am no longer a target for political marriage alliances." Selene snorted. "So I'm your beard with benefits?" "No benefits," he said coolly. "That's part of the clause. This marriage will remain unconsummated. Public affection only." Selene's breath caught. She wasn't sure why. It wasn't disappointment exactly. More like confusion. He added, "You'll receive $500,000 for 1 year, room and board, access to Vexwood security." Her heart nearly stopped. $500,000? Selene's student loans, credit card debt, and last 3 months of ramen dinners did a little conga line in her brain. "Still, you think I'm that desperate? You wore a dress 2 sizes too tight and tried to pitch your design services to a vampire who collects taxidermy." He raised a brow. "I think you are that desperate." Selene winced. "Fair." Alaric stepped closer again. His gaze pinned her. "This is not personal. I need peace. You need money. We make a deal. You act the part of my wife for 12 months, attend keypack events, and at the end, you disappear. Rich." Selene eyed him. "And what do I have to do during your heat season?" His jaw ticked. "My pack uses alchemic suppressants," she smirked. "So I won't wake up with fang marks? No. A shame." Another twitch. And this time she saw it, just a flash. of something in his eyes that wasn't cold. Something that looked. She let out a long sigh. All right. Let's say I'm stupid enough to go through with this. What's the catch? He tapped the contract. There's a supernatural clause. Once you sign, it seals with magic. You can't back out. I figured, and if we consummate it, he said slowly, voice like whiskey over ice, it becomes permanent, life bonded. Selene blinked. So no sex or I'm mated to you forever? He nodded once. She looked at the contract. Then at him. Fine, she said. Hand me a pen. Alaric hesitated. You should think about this, he said. This is more than just a signature. Once it seals, it marks you. It ties us in the eyes of every court, council, and clan. Selene rolled her eyes. Let me guess. You're doing me a favor. No. His voice dropped an octave. You're doing me a favor, so don't make me regret it. She grabbed the pen, and with one smooth stroke of her name across enchanted parchment, Selene Thorne became the fake wife of the most dangerous alpha in the supernatural world. The magic shimmered gold. The parchment vanished in a flash. Her skin tingled. Something warm laced around her wrist like a spectral ribbon, vanishing just as fast. Alaric stood silent, jaw locked. Selene crossed her arms. Well, she said, when's the honeymoon? Chapter 2. Welcome to the Wolf's Den. The Vexwood estate was not a house. It was a compound. A fortress. A high-security, Gothic-meets-modern architectural fever dream nestled deep within the redwoods north of Arcane Ridge. The kind of place you'd expect to find in a high-budget vampire series or a billionaire's doomsday survival fantasy. Think towering spires, enchanted steel gates, glass walls reinforced with moonstone, and a private helipad. Selene stared out the window of the black SUV as it wound up the driveway, past snarling stone wolf statues and a long, gleaming black river that might have been decorative, or might have been alive. Wow, she murmured, clutching her duffel bag. This place screams, I have a dark secret and 6 offshore accounts. Across from her in the back seat, Alaric said nothing. Typical. He'd barely spoken since they left the Celestian Tower the night. After the contract had sealed, he'd simply handed her a phone, top of the line, with her name already programmed in, and told her a car would arrive at noon. Then he'd vanished into the crowd like a well-dressed ghost with commitment issues. Now Selene was officially moving in with a stranger, a ruthless billionaire alpha, in a house that probably had more hidden passageways than light switches. But it was fine, totally normal. Just another Tuesday in her life. The car finally rolled to a stop in front of a massive front door made of onyx and silver. It opened before she could reach for the handle. Out stepped a tall, wiry man with frosty blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and the eternal look of someone who had just smelled something inferior. He wore a dark uniform with a silver wolf pin. Miss Thorne, he said with the sort of formal bow that could cut glass. Welcome to Vexwood Hall. I am Dorian, head of estate staff. I am aware of the arrangement. Selene smiled. Hi, Dorian. Love your whole vampire lawyer aesthetic. He blinked once, slowly. I am not a vampire. Noted. She stepped out, grabbing her bag. So do I get a tour, or is this one of those estates where guests mysteriously disappear into the rose maze? Dorian didn't flinch. Your room is ready. Breakfast is served promptly at 7. Security access will be added to your fingerprint and retinal scan this evening. The alpha prefers quiet. No disruptions after 10 p.m. unless, of course, you're bleeding out. Charming. Try not to redecorate, he added, gesturing toward the entry. The alpha dislikes clutter. Selene squinted past the door into the marble entryway beyond. Define clutter, personality. Well, that explained a lot. Inside, the estate was cathedral meets tech billionaire. High vaulted ceilings, massive windows. A scent of pine, polished wood, and expensive cologne lingered in the air. The main hall had floors so shiny she saw her own baffled reflection as she followed Dorian across the entry. Every wall was tastefully minimalist, sleek, shadowy, cold. It felt more like a corporate lair than a home. Is this the alpha's art? Selene asked, glancing at a large abstract painting that resembled either a volcanic eruption or a particularly aggressive breakup. It's from a cursed gallery in Prague, supposedly haunted by the soul of a warlock's mistress. Selene grinned. Feng shui must have been a nightmare. Dorian stopped in front of a wide door. This is your room. She stepped inside and immediately stopped breathing. It was enormous. Vaulted ceilings, a full wall of enchanted glass that overlooked the misty forest, a fireplace large enough to host a séance, shelves of ancient books, plush rugs, velvet curtains, a 4-poster bed so big it could comfortably host a 3-wolf cuddle pile. Selene let out a low whistle. Holy shifter money. The bathroom has a lunar phase soaking tub and temperature-enchanted water, Dorian said dryly. The closet is enchanted to organize your wardrobe by occasion. You had me at enchanted closet. As Dorian turned to leave, he added, Do remember, Miss Thorne, while you are here as the Alpha's wife, your presence in his quarters is not required, nor recommended. Was that a warning? She asked sweetly. It was a wish. He disappeared into the hallway like a resentful puff of smoke. Selene sighed and plopped onto the edge of the bed. The mattress practically sighed beneath her. She wiggled her toes, kicked off her heels, and took in her surroundings. She was officially married, sort of, to an alpha. In a house that looked like it had eaten 6 other houses and then installed gold plumbing, she rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling. Well, Selene, she said to herself, you've outdone yourself this time. She stayed in the room for hours, explored, took a bubble bath in the tub big enough to sail, discovered that the closet did indeed organize by event, including a tab labeled political drama and another labeled mating threat deterrent. By the time night fell, she was curled on the sofa in a silk robe, sipping hot cocoa and pretending she didn't hear footsteps outside her door. 3 soft knocks, then silence. She waited. Then opened the door. Alaric stood there, as always, dressed in black, but this time without a jacket. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, his expression unreadable. Selene leaned on the doorframe. Miss me already? His jaw ticked. The council expects us to attend a gala this weekend. They want a public display of unity. Sounds kinky. He handed her a file. You'll need to memorize the details of our supposed relationship. Where we met, how long we've been together, how I proposed. She flipped open the folder. You proposed on a glacier in Iceland after rescuing me from a cursed wolfhawk? He blinked. Dorian wrote that. I like Dorian now. Alaric cleared his throat. You'll also be moved to the East Wing tomorrow. Why? He hesitated. You're too close to my chambers. Her smile grew wicked. Worried you'll start liking me? His eyes met hers, unwavering. I don't like anyone. You're fun. Without another word, he turned and walked away. But she noticed something he probably didn't mean to reveal. His hands were clenched at his sides. Not in anger, in restraint. Later that night, Selene dreamed of wolves howling on mountaintops, of heat, of growls that weren't violent, but wanting. Her skin tingled with energy, like the house itself was breathing around her. And when she woke at dawn, heart racing, the scent of pine and smoke still lingered in the air, as if Alaric Vexwood had passed by her door during the night. And stopped. Chapter 3. The Alpha's Arm Candy. The Vexwood estate's east wing was colder than the west. Not in temperature. Alaric's home was practically climate-controlled by moonstone and witch-blessed vents, but in energy. The decor was sharper. The angles were more aggressive. Even the paintings on the walls stared with condescension, like they'd once been humans with strong opinions about which fork to use at royal banquets. Selene suspected that this part of the house was designed with one thing in mind: intimidation, which of course made her want to fill it with lava lamps and posters of pastel kittens. She hadn't yet gotten that far, but she had unpacked her makeup drawer, and in this house of shadows and secrets, her Fenty highlighter and holographic eyeshadow felt like rebellion. At precisely 9 a.m., Dorian knocked on her new chamber door. He didn't enter, just cleared his throat like he was summoning someone from a séance. Miss Thorne, the Alpha has arranged for your grooming. Grooming? She called through the door, tugging on her robe. I'm not a show dog. I'm told the word was selected by the stylist. She arrives in 5. Selene yanked the door open. I'm sorry, there's a stylist? Dorian offered a grim smile. It's gala day. 3 hours, 2 mimosas, and 1 threat to shave her stylist later. Selene stood in front of the enchanted mirror in a dress that could only be described as weapons grade. It was silk, black as a wolf's midnight howl. The bodice hugged her with tender violence, and the slit up her thigh was probably illegal in certain provinces. Her collarbones glittered with a shimmer of enchanted dust. Her lips were a crimson that whispered, I might kiss you or destroy you, and you'll thank me either way." The stylist, a fey hybrid named Lavinia, clapped in delight. "You look like the mistress of his darkest desire. I was going for rich trophy wife with a vendetta. Same thing." Dorian escorted her to the front entrance where a sleek, obsidian sports car waited. It was a custom job. Alaric stood beside it like a Calvin Klein ad filtered through a noir aesthetic. Black tux, crisp lines, and an aura of, "Don't talk to me unless you're a wolf, a god, or legally dead." Selene's heels clicked across the stone as she approached him. "Wow," she said. "You look like you're about to either propose or deliver a blood pact to the underworld." Alaric's eyes dragged down her figure with the slow, lethal grace of a predator who did notice his prey, but had the self-control to savor the suspense. "You clean up," he said. "I hope that's not your pillow talk." He opened the passenger door. "Try not to bite anyone unless it's strategic." "Oh, honey," she purred as she slid into the seat. "Biting is my strategy." The venue was the Lunaria Sanctum, a crystal and marble monstrosity used exclusively for elite pack gatherings and scandalous supernatural negotiations. Think Versailles if it were redesigned by high-fashion wolves with generational trauma. Inside, shifters prowled through crowds in shimmering gowns and tailored suits. Every corner smelled like dominance, power, and perfumes infused with magic. There was a tension in the air, part ancient pack hierarchy, part champagne-fueled envy. Selene was aware of every eye on her as she entered on Alaric's arm, some curious, some scandalized, some hungry. They were looking at her, no, judging her. The new wife, the contract bride, the no-name witchling with a reputation for starting bar fights and using glitter spells in formal duels. She smiled brighter. Let them wonder. Alaric's hand on her lower back guided her like a command. It was warm, possessive, fake, mostly. "Don't wander off," he murmured as they entered the grand ballroom. "You afraid I'll embarrass you? I'm afraid you'll start a revolution." "Oh, good," she said sweetly. "You have been reading my blog." She spotted him near the bar, tall, blonde, smug, reeking of bergamot and regret. Cassian Greaves. The warlock who had once dumped her via psychic projection during her birthday brunch. He stood surrounded by lesser men in silver suits, laughing at something that probably involved mansplaining moon cycles. Selene groaned. "You have got to be kidding me." Alaric glanced at her. "Enemy?" "Ex," she muttered. "Should I challenge him to a duel or banish him from the room?" She blinked. "Wait, those are actual options." "I'm an alpha," Alaric said coolly. "Everything's an option." Before she could answer, Cassian's eyes found her. His smirk twitched. He approached. "Selene," he said, as though her name was something he only remembered after smelling it on an overpriced candle. "Didn't expect to see you here. Especially not on the arm of the Vexwood Alpha." Selene grinned like a feral cat. "Cassian. Still styling your hair like a failed wind spell?" Cassian's jaw twitched. "I didn't realize you and Alaric were together." "We're married," Alaric said flatly. Cassian's brow twitched. "Ah, married." Selene batted her lashes. "And it's going really well, isn't it, darling?" Without missing a beat, she turned toward Alaric and kissed him. It was supposed to be a peck, a press of lips to seal the illusion. But he didn't pull back. Instead, he leaned in, one hand catching her waist. The kiss deepened for just a second, long enough for Selene's heart to flip and her breath to catch. His lips were warm, commanding, like they hadn't just kissed, but made a silent agreement. Play the game, play it well, but don't pretend you didn't feel that. When she pulled back, Cassian looked like he'd bitten a lemon soaked in betrayal. "I see," he said, voice tight. "Well, best of luck to you both." He turned and stalked away. Selene let out a breath. "Okay, I love that for us." Alaric's eyes were unreadable. It was necessary. "For the performance, right?" "Yes," he said, but his gaze lingered. Of course. After the gala back at Vexwood Hall, Selene was still humming from the chaos of the evening. She kicked off her heels, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and found Alaric already there, loosening his tie, 2 buttons undone, a glass of something dark in his hand. "You kissed me like you meant it," she said lightly. He looked at her, long and slow. "I meant for him to believe it. Is that all?" Alaric tilted his head. "Would it matter if it wasn't?" Her stomach did a backflip. "Not at all," she lied. He stepped closer. "Your trouble, Selene Thorne." She sipped from his glass and met his stare. And you married me, Alaric Vexwood. Chapter 4. Full Moons and Fake Feelings. There are certain things that sober a girl up faster than a post-gala buzz. For example, finding out your fake husband has locked himself in the lunar vault. Hearing whispers about a rogue alpha from the north making moves on your new territory. And worst of all, realizing the chemistry between you and said fake husband is no longer part of the script. Selene was pacing the Vexwood library barefoot, her gown trailing behind her like a villainous ghost. Her hair was still in its enchanted twist, but a few rogue curls framed her face in deliberate chaos. She hadn't changed after the gala, because she hadn't been able to, because she'd been thinking. And that was dangerous. The morning after the moon was fading in the sky, when Alaric finally emerged from the lunar vault beneath the estate. The vault was off limits to everyone but the Alpha. It was where he went during high-stress transformations, blood rituals, or when pack law required him to commune with the ancestral spirits that guarded his bloodline. Selene had only heard rumors about what happened inside it. Some said he turned feral during the full moon and needed to be chained to the roots of the moon tree. Others whispered about blood sacrifices and ancient languages, one which even claimed Alaric had once seen the ghost of his mother sobbing in silver fire. Selene wasn't sure which theory she liked best, but when she saw him walk into the library, shirtless, slightly damp, his chest marked with fresh claw scars glowing faintly silver, she decided her brain wasn't functioning well enough to consider any theory. "Rough night?" she said, crossing her arms over the silk of her dress. Alaric looked up at her, eyes still tinged with the pale gold of his beast. "You shouldn't be awake," he said. "You shouldn't be wounded." He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the drinks cabinet, poured himself something amber and ancient, and leaned against the marble bar. "Cassian texted you." Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" He handed her a phone. Her phone. Alaric had apparently confiscated it from her clutch earlier. "How?" "I don't trust him," Alaric said flatly, "and I don't trust what his attention on you means." "Wow." Selene took the phone, scrolling through the message. "Cassian, you looked stunning last night. I know I screwed things up. Can we talk?" Her thumb hovered over the reply icon. Then she looked at Alaric. "You do know I'm not actually yours, right?" Something dark flickered behind his eyes. "We made vows. Fake ones. Fake or not," Alaric said quietly. "You bear my name. That has meaning in my world." Her stomach did that irritating swoop again. Before she could respond, the library door opened and Dorian slipped in, face grim. "My Alpha," he said. "We have news." Dorian spread a map on the library table, enchanted ink glowing under the chandelier's moon crystal light. "Alpha Vex," he said, using the war title now. "You were right. It's him. Cale Corvin." Selene's ears pricked. The name sounded like it had been carved in blood and sealed with a curse. "Kyle?" Alaric's voice was cold steel wrapped in velvet. "He's not supposed to be this far south." "He's claiming asylum under rogue law," Dorian said. "But we intercepted communication. He's after your seat. He's building a faction." "Why now?" Selene asked. Dorian hesitated. "Because you're married." Silence. Alaric's jaw tightened. "Explain." Words spreading. "The Alpha finally chose a Luna. That weakens your solitary power. Some see it as a sign you're ready to be challenged." Selene's mouth dropped open. "So me marrying you made you more vulnerable?" "In the eyes of some," Dorian said. "Yes." "Great," she muttered. "So I'm a liability now. I thought I was just a scandal." Alaric's voice was low. "You're not a liability." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "Then why didn't you tell me this was why you needed a marriage contract? I thought it was just for appearances." He hesitated. "Selene, if I hadn't bound myself to someone, the council would have forced a union. One I couldn't control. They wanted me to take a Luna from a northern bloodline." She narrowed her eyes. "So I'm the shield marriage. You were the only one who wouldn't demand anything back." "Oh, how romantic," she snapped. He stepped closer. "I needed someone I could trust not to betray me. That's worth more than love." She stared at him, then laughed bitterly. "You really don't understand women, do you?" It was close to dawn when Selene stormed into the East Wing and realized the guest bedroom had been sealed. Locked with blood magic. She tried every trick she knew, including a particularly creative chant involving lunar goddess insults. but the door remained firm. When she stormed back into the west wing, Alaric was already in his chamber, removing his watch and kicking off his boots like the world hadn't just shattered on his behalf. "You locked the guest wing," she said. "I'm aware." She stalked toward him. "Why? Because the council might send an envoy. If they suspect our bond is a formality, I lose my alpha status. So what? I sleep on your floor like a domesticated poodle." His gaze was unreadable. "You sleep in the bed. With me." She crossed her arms. "You expect me to cuddle up to the wolf who used me as political camouflage?" "No," he said, voice low. "I expect you to lie beside the man who needs you alive long enough to survive what's coming." There was silence. Then she walked to the other side of the bed and got in, keeping her back firmly to him. They lay in silence, 1 heartbeat, 2, 1,000, and then, "Alaric?" she whispered. "Yes? If I accidentally spoon you in my sleep, it's not affection. It's strategic body heat collection." A pause. Then, so quiet it could have been a sigh or a smirk, understood. Chapter 5. The Council, the Bite, and the Blood-Soaked Letter. The thing about being the fake wife of a ruthless billionaire alpha was this: eventually, someone would want to see a mark, not a wedding band, not a selfie, not a marriage certificate signed by a sleepy magistrate who owed Alaric Vexwood a favor. No, a mark. A real bite. Left by an alpha on his mate. A claim in flesh, and that, dear moon and stars, was how Selene found herself standing half-naked in front of the Elder Council, a borrowed silk, robe sliding off one shoulder, and her very fake husband growling possessively into the curve of her neck as his fangs hovered just above her skin. It was 10:03 a.m. on a Thursday. She hadn't even had coffee. Earlier that morning, the knock came at sunrise, a knock that vibrated with magic, a knock that smelled of iron, old parchment, and judgment. Alaric had been in the war room reviewing Kyle's message. It had arrived via crow, black feathers dipped in blood, and sealed with the Corvin crest. He hadn't shown Selene the message yet. She'd been too busy in the East Wing bathing off last night's stress with lavender salts and moonstone steam, but as soon as the knock echoed through the manor, she'd known something had changed. When she walked into the grand hall, hair still damp and robe cinched tight, she found Alaric standing at the door, tense, shirtless, and barefoot, as 4 elder wolves entered the estate. Each was dressed in ceremonial black, edged with silver thread. Each bore a brand over their left eye, a scar of loyalty to the old ways. The tallest among them, Elder Kalen, looked directly at her. "So," he said, voice like dry leaves, "this is the Luna." "I didn't realize there'd be an inspection," Selene whispered harshly as Alaric led her into the moon chamber. "They come unannounced when succession is in question," he replied. "They want to know our bond is real. If they suspect a contract marriage, I could lose everything. And you couldn't have warned me before I got dressed?" "You're not dressed," he muttered, glancing at her robe. She glared. "My point exactly." The moon chamber was circular, filled with lunar crystal and ancient mirrors that reflected one's aura. The elders were already seated at the obsidian table in the center. Elder Kalen motioned for her to come forward. Selene swallowed hard. They asked her questions about how they met, where they mated, what rituals they'd performed, if she had felt the bond. She answered smoothly, recalling every lie they'd agreed upon. Until Kalen tilted his head. "Let us see the mark." There was a pause. Selene turned to Alaric. His eyes were unreadable, cold, calculating. "Alpha." But then something shifted. A flicker of apology. He stepped behind her, large hands brushing the silk aside until her shoulder was bare. She felt his breath on her skin. The slow descent of his mouth, his voice soft for her ears only. "Are you sure?" Her breath hitched. No, she wasn't sure. But it didn't matter anymore. She tilted her head, and he bit her, not hard, not deep, just enough to break skin, just enough to let his scent mingle with hers in the way of true mates. The room went silent. One of the mirrors shimmered, and then, acceptance. The elders rose. "The bond is acknowledged," Kalen said, and they left as quietly as they'd come. She didn't speak to him for a full hour. Not when he followed her into the parlor. Not when he tried to hand her tea. Not even when Dorian whispered that Kyle's message had been decoded. But then she finally turned. "Why didn't you ask me sooner?" she asked. "I didn't know it would be required so soon." "No," she said. "I mean, about the mark." You hesitated. "I saw it in your eyes." "Why?" Alaric looked at her for a long moment. "Because once I bit you, Selene, no one else ever could. Even if this marriage ends, that mark stays." Something in her chest cracked. "I didn't think you cared," she whispered. "I didn't think I did either," he said quietly. Later that evening, while the sun bled out across the Vexwood sky, Dorian returned to the war room holding the parchment sealed in blood. Selene was in a velvet chair, sipping honey wine, her skin still sore where Alaric had marked her. He took the scroll, unrolled it, read silently. Then he spoke. "To the Pretender Alpha, I see you've marked your puppet. Let's see if your bond holds under blood and fire. The moon will rise in 7 days. I challenge you at Hollowfang Ridge, come alone, or your Luna dies first." Selene stared at the letter, then at Alaric. "Wow," she said faintly. "Your exes are intense." Chapter 6, Training, Secrets, and the Moon Garden. There were 2 types of women in stories like this. The first kind waited to be rescued, usually in silk nightgowns with tear-streaked cheeks and softly whispered prayers to the moon. The second kind sharpened metaphorical daggers with their teeth, smirked at the apocalypse, and prepared for war with eyeliner and unshakable spite. Selene had no intention of becoming the first, not after reading Kyle Corvin's blood-soaked letter, not after feeling Alaric's teeth on her skin, and definitely not after realizing just how real their very fake marriage had suddenly become. Selene stood in the sparring hall of House Vexwood, barefoot and furious, with a training staff in hand, and her long braid whipped over one shoulder like a weapon. The chamber was ancient, designed for combat, not vanity, with carved runes glowing along the perimeter and silver-lined walls that pulsed with ancestral energy. She faced off against Dorian, who, despite being a beta, was built like a war god and had the patience of a man who'd been babysitting an alpha's mood swings for years. "Again," he said, circling her like a predator. "I am doing it again," Selene growled. "You just keep cheating. It's called strategy." Dorian lunged, the tip of his staff barely missing her ribs. "Kyle won't go easy on you. Well, he can choke on a silver fork." Dorian grinned despite himself. "You're improving. Still too soft on your left." She huffed, adjusted her stance, and struck again, this time catching him off guard. He stepped back with a surprised laugh. "I swear to the moon, if anyone tries to kill me, I'm going to haunt them into their next life," she muttered. Alaric's voice came from the corner. "I believe that." Selene turned mid-strike and nearly tripped. Alaric stood in the doorway, dressed in charcoal black combat pants and a sleeveless tunic that did little to hide the power coiled beneath his skin. His golden eyes flickered, scanning her. "You're training," he said. "You sound surprised." "I'm not used to my Luna preparing to kill my enemies." She raised an eyebrow. "Fake Luna." He walked closer. "Doesn't change the target." After training, Alaric summoned her to the war room. The table had been cleared. Only one file lay open, an old photo of a woman with silver hair and eyes like midnight ice. Alaric slid it toward her. "Kyle's sister," he said. Selene looked down at the image. The woman was breathtaking in a cold, tragic sort of way. A distant beauty. Sharp cheekbones, haunted expression. There was something almost familiar about her. "She looks like she saw too much and felt nothing," Selene murmured. She was Kyle's twin, Nyra Corvin, a prophet and a wild blood. Selene looked up sharply. "A what?" "Wild blood," Alaric said. "Shifters who are born with the blood of more than one beast. Rare, dangerous." She had both wolf and serpent within her. "And what happened to her?" "She vanished the night I challenged Kyle's father for control of the northern houses. The same night I killed him." Selene froze. "You killed Kyle's father?" she asked. Alaric's face was stone. It was a sanctioned challenge. Blood for leadership. He was corrupt, cruel, and had started abducting wild bloods for experimentation. Selene swallowed hard. "And Kyle never forgave you?" "No, and if I'm right, he blames me for his sister's disappearance, too." There was silence between them, and then, quietly, Selene asked, "Did you love her?" Alaric didn't answer right away. "No," he finally said. "But she loved me, and I never had the chance to tell her the truth." That night, Selene couldn't sleep. Her body ached from training, her mind ached from questions, and her soul ached from something she didn't want to name yet. So she wandered into the moon garden. It sat at the far end of the Vexwood estate, an ancient grove surrounded by silver trees that only bloomed under moonlight. The air smelled like magic and old memories. She sat by the crescent-shaped pool, trailing her fingers through the water, thinking about Kyle's challenge. Would Alaric survive? Would she? And why did it hurt to think of losing him, when this marriage was supposed to be nothing? She didn't hear him approach, but she felt him. "You always come here when you're brooding," Alaric said softly. "Maybe I like moonlight more than you." He sat beside her, close enough for his warmth to curl against her bare arm. "Most do," she looked at him. "Tell me the truth." "About what?" "Naira, Kyle, us. Any of it. I'm tired of being a player in a script I didn't write." Alaric exhaled slowly. "I never wanted a mate. I figured. My wolf, he doesn't trust easily, and I've seen too many Lunas used as pawns. I thought if I stayed alone, I'd protect everyone, myself included. And now?" His eyes found hers, and something raw passed between them. "I'm not sure anymore." She swallowed hard. "Do you regret choosing me?" she whispered. "No," his voice was hoarse. "I regret not choosing you sooner." Something broke in her then. She leaned closer. He didn't stop her. The kiss wasn't a kiss. It was a breath, a shared silence, a hover. And then, contact. Soft, warm, charged with everything they hadn't said. His hand tangled in her hair. Her fingers curled around his shirt. They pulled apart a second later, breathing hard. "Still pretending?" she asked. "Every second. Liar." Chapter 7. Shadows at the gate. The scent of blood hit first. Then came the thunder. Not of the skies, but of claws against stone, growls thick with rage, and the unmistakable ripple of dark magic unfurling like a storm from beneath the earth. It was not yet dawn. The world should have still been quiet. But war did not keep time. 4 hours earlier, Selene couldn't sleep after the kiss. She had wandered back to her chambers from the moon garden dazed and aching, skin flushed from Alaric's lips, and something far deeper, the sensation of falling into something real, terrifying, and inescapable. She should have felt triumphant. She'd kissed the alpha and made him feel something. Instead, she'd lain awake staring at the ceiling, her fingers brushing the faint mark on her shoulder where he'd bitten her. Was it only political now? Or was she becoming something more? More than a contract, more than a ruse. She thought of the fire in his eyes when he looked at her. Not just lust, but something ancient, something hungry, something that wanted not just her body, but her soul. She had no idea if that should scare her or thrill her. Both, probably. It began with a single howl, piercing, mournful, and wrong. Selene shot upright in bed, heart hammering. She heard a second howl moments later, closer. Then a third, lower, darker. She moved instinctively, throwing off the covers and racing to the balcony. From the height of her tower, she saw the flickering edges of movement in the northern woods. Shadows, shifting, multiplying. Dozens of them. Dorian's voice boomed through the estate a moment later. "We're under attack!" And in the space of a heartbeat, the peaceful cold of pre-dawn was shredded by chaos. Alaric shifted mid-air. 1 second, he was leaping from the east wing balcony in human form. The next, his bones cracked and reshaped. Fur burst from skin, and the beast emerged, massive, black-furred, eyes like molten gold, taller than any wolf Selene had ever seen. The true alpha form, the Vexwood lineage incarnate. He landed in the courtyard with a roar, instantly met by 5 attackers, Kael's rogue shifters, all clad in enchanted black iron armor, each wielding forbidden blades laced with poison. Selene stood frozen at the top of the stairwell, watching him move. He was a storm, a symphony of violence, every movement a blur of deadly precision. But he was outnumbered. And worse, Kael's magic was in the air. Thick, rotten, corrupting the very soil. She should have run, should have stayed back. But Selene wasn't made for standing still. A scream cut through the night. Not hers, a child's. One of the servant wolves, barely 12, was caught in the chaos. The boy had been delivering sunrise candles from the southern corridor and had wandered into the chaos by mistake. A rogue shifter turned toward him, eyes glowing red, blade drawn. And that was when it happened. Selene didn't think. She moved. She sprinted past the line of guards, past the warning shouts, down the stone stairs until her feet hit blood-slicked ground. The rogue raised his blade, and Selene raised her hand. No weapon. Just instinct. A sudden crack tore through the air, followed by a blinding flash of violet-white light that exploded from her fingertips, knocking the rogue clear off his feet. The energy rippled outward, consuming 2 more attackers. The courtyard went silent for a heartbeat. Then, "She's a conduit," someone whispered. "A conduit, not a witch, not a wolf, something rarer, something ancient, magic through her, not from her, a vessel of ancestral force." When the attackers retreated, it was not because Alaric had bested them. It was because Selene had stood at the gates, her hands glowing, her eyes blazing, her power radiating from her like a lunar firestorm. Kael's message had been received. The Luna was not just an accessory, she was a threat. And that made her dangerous. Inside the war room, Dorian wrapped a healing salve around her forearm. She sat on the edge of the table, still shaking from the burst of power. Alaric stood across from her, watching like a man trying to piece together a puzzle that had changed shape while he wasn't looking. "You saved the boy," he said. She met his gaze. I felt it, the power. Like it had been waiting. His voice was hoarse. That was ancestral energy. It only chooses those who are meant to bear the legacy of a pack. She blinked. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying it shouldn't have chosen you unless you were truly bonded to the alpha of the house." Silence fell between them, the kind of silence that changed everything. Selene stood, slowly, every step echoing across the chamber. She walked up to him, took his hand and placed it over her heart. "Then stop pretending, Alaric," she whispered, "because I think you know as well as I do. We're not faking this anymore." His hand tightened over her chest, and then his mouth was on hers, rough, desperate, claiming. This was not a kiss of obligation. This was a beginning. They burned together, and neither of them looked away. Chapter 8. The Gift, the Bloodline, and the Bond. The morning after the attack arrived reluctantly. The skies above Vexwood were a strange color, dusky lavender streaked with gray, as if the heavens couldn't decide whether to mourn or celebrate. The estate lay quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that followed bloodshed and buried secrets. Selene stood at her bedroom window, wrapped in a black silk robe, staring at the scars in the stone courtyard below, the evidence of her unleashed power. Her palms still tingled faintly, not from magic, but from memory. The kiss, the fire, the choice they'd made, or had it made them? She couldn't stop hearing his voice from last night. "We're not faking this anymore." She wanted to believe it. But believing in something meant risking it. And Alaric Vexwood was still an alpha with secrets locked behind golden eyes that revealed nothing and shoulders that bore too much. She pressed a hand to her chest. Her heartbeat was steady now. But for how long? An hour after sunrise, a message arrived, not a letter, a gift. Selene had just joined Alaric and Dorian in the High Council room when a courier stepped in. A shaking young messenger with pale skin and wide eyes. He was accompanied by 2 elite guards and carried something wrapped in black velvet, sealed with crimson wax. Alaric didn't move, Dorian did. He approached the bundle with practiced caution, sniffed once, then frowned deeply. "There's blood on this. Open it," Alaric said coldly. Dorian broke the seal with a blade and pulled back the velvet. Selene gasped. Inside was a single item, a ceremonial dagger, long, curved, and ancient. The handle was made of polished onyx inlaid with silver moon runes. The blade itself was soaked in dried blood. And something else. Something darker. A strip of parchment was tied around the hilt. Dorian read it aloud, his voice like stone. "This belonged to your mate's mother. Perhaps she can use it to uncover what you've both so carefully forgotten. Tick-tock, Alpha. The past always comes home. K." Selene went still. Alaric's fists clenched. Her mother. She had no memory of her, only glimpses, a lullaby, a whisper of lavender perfume. And now a dagger. Selene reached for it. Alaric blocked her hand. "Don't. I have to. It could be cursed. I don't care." Their eyes locked. "Let me see it, Alaric." Reluctantly, he stepped aside. She reached for the blade and, the moment her skin made contact, everything shattered. She didn't pass out. She fell inward. Memories she'd never lived surged forward, visions not her own, but somehow hers. A young woman, cloaked in silver, running through a forest soaked in moonlight. Her hand gripped that same dagger. Wolves chased her, not to kill her, to claim her. She carries the phoenix flame, one hissed. Kill her before it wakes. A voice screamed, protect her. The last of the sunborn line must live. Selene gasped as images flooded her mother wielding the dagger, her father cloaking her in a protection ward, a bloodline that stretched back to the Sunborn clan, an extinct house of hybrid shifters who carried within them a dormant magic said to be stronger than lunar-born wolves. Phoenix magic. Selene was a sunborn. Her mother had hidden her, erased her memories, and bound her powers to keep her safe. Until now. She awoke on the stone floor of the council room. Alaric knelt over her, golden eyes wild with fear. Dorian stood guard, growling softly at the dagger, which now pulsed faintly with red light. What did you see? Alaric asked. Selene swallowed. My mother, the phoenix flame. I'm not just a conduit, I'm descended from the sunborn. Alaric looked like she'd punched him. Sunborn? Dorian muttered. I thought they were wiped out before the fall of the Fourth Age. So did I, Alaric whispered. Selene sat up. Kyle knows. That's why he's pushing for war. He wants my blood, my power. Alaric looked down at her hand, then up at her face. And suddenly his expression shifted, from fear to something like awe. You weren't sent to me, he said quietly. You were meant for me. That night, the Moon High Priestess arrived. She was summoned not for war but for something older, sacred, binding, a ceremony. Not the fake one from before. A true bond marking. Selene and Alaric stood barefoot in the moon garden, surrounded by silver flame torches and ancient carved stones. The priestess stood between them, chanting in a language Selene's blood remembered even if her mind didn't. You are no longer playing, the priestess said. Your wolves have chosen. Your magic has spoken. Tonight, the moon seals what your hearts already know. Alaric took her hands. No audience, no politics, just him, just her, just the truth between them. His voice was low. You don't have to do this. I'll protect you either way. I'm not afraid, Selene whispered. I am. Then let me protect you too. He leaned down, lips brushing her ear. You already have. Then, in one motion, they cut their palms and pressed them together. Blood mixed, light flared, and the mark appeared, etched on their skin like fire carved in starlight. An ancient sigil older than the Vexwoods or the Corvins. The moon had accepted their bond, and for the first time Selene felt it, not just in her veins, but in her bones. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was his, and he was hers. Chapter 9, The Phoenix Awakened. The night after the moonlit bonding ritual was far from peaceful. Selene lay wide awake in the grand bed that felt far too large for two people to share. But here they were. Alaric had given her a moment to breathe. He'd retreated to his study, leaving her with nothing but the flickering candlelight and the sudden surge of magic coursing through her veins. She didn't understand what had happened during the ritual. She had felt the energy, the connection, between her and Alaric, the way their blood had mingled, how it had fused with the ancient sigil now burned into their palms. But it was more than that. She could feel the power now, deep inside her. Her blood hummed with something primal, something uncontrollable. It was like an endless storm was locked behind her ribs. Phoenix magic, she hadn't believed it. But now she felt it. The warmth, the heat, the fire. Selene sat up in bed, clutching the sheets around her. Her skin tingled. Her chest felt tight, but not in fear. It was as though someone, was awakening inside her. The phoenix flame, her powers, her heritage, and Kyle had known it. That cursed, conniving alpha had known exactly what she was, and why she was dangerous. She closed her eyes, trying to center herself, but it only made the heat inside her burn hotter. Unfamiliar, wild, and aching to be unleashed. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Alaric's study smelled like aged books and cinnamon, two things that had once calmed Selene. But now, the rich old scents did nothing to soothe her. He was bent over his desk, eyes scanning ancient scrolls of his own, occasionally glancing at her as if checking her reaction to something unspoken. Finally he spoke, his voice a deep, soothing timbre. You felt it, didn't you? Selene nodded slowly. The fire, the phoenix flame. What am I supposed to do with it? Alaric closed the scroll in front of him and turned to face her fully. You're not supposed to do anything with it. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means, he said, rising from the desk, his body still radiating strength and power, that this magic is dangerous. Dangerous to you and more dangerous to anyone who tries to control it. She took a step forward, suddenly overwhelmed with a need to understand. But Kyle knew. He knew what I was. That's why he's after me. This isn't just about the bond between us. This is about my bloodline, my power. Alaric's gaze flickered with something sharp. Anger, fear? She couldn't tell. Kyle has a deal with the underworld. It's not just some empty threat, he explained, pacing. He wants you. He wants your bloodline. He's tried to manipulate the magic of the Phoenix Flame for decades, and he believes that if he can harness it— Her breath caught. He'll become unstoppable. Alaric nodded grimly. He's already powerful, but if he gains control of the Phoenix Flame, he will have dominion over both the mortal and supernatural realms. She stared at him. Horror growing. How can we stop him? I'll protect you, Alaric vowed, his voice low but filled with an intensity that made her chest tighten. But we need to move quickly. Kyle's plans are already in motion. The next day, Alaric took Selene to the Vexwood training grounds. It wasn't a place she had visited before. It was an expansive, open area, enclosed by high stone walls, and it was filled with equipment she didn't recognize. Strange, ceremonial weapons, targets, and ancient structures designed for magical combat. I need you to learn to control it, Selene, Alaric said, his voice echoing as they walked toward the center of the grounds. Your fire. It's stronger than any power I've felt, but it's raw, untamed. If you lose control, you could endanger us all. She shook her head. I don't even know where to begin. Alaric's eyes softened, and for a moment, his fierce, ruthless demeanor gave way to something more human. You're not alone in this. I'll teach you, every step of the way, but you need to trust me, and trust yourself. Selene hesitated, then nodded. Okay. With a flick of his wrist, Alaric summoned a target, a simple wooden mannequin. But as he did so, he infused it with his own energy. The wooden figure began to glow with an ethereal blue light. Try it. Control your power and focus it on the target. Selene stepped forward, feeling the heat within her intensify. It was like standing at the edge of a wildfire, and she could feel the magic crawling under her skin. She raised her hand, concentrating on the target. The fire that burst forth from her fingers was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't just flame. It was pure energy. The fire exploded from her palm, encasing the wooden mannequin in a twisting mass of flame. But instead of dissipating, the flames continued to grow, lashing out like living things, clawing at the air around her. Focus, Alaric shouted. Focus on the target, not the fire. Don't let it control you. Her chest tightened. She couldn't feel the fire. It was just there, rampaging inside her, consuming everything in its path. She gritted her teeth, and for a moment, it felt as though her power was slipping from her grasp. But then, something clicked, a sudden surge of awareness. She was the flame. Her body stilled. She took a deep breath, letting the fire settle around her. Slowly, carefully, she willed it to follow her will. The flames bent, twisting and twirling like a dance, until they finally formed around the target in a controlled blaze. It stood, untouched, alive. And then, Selene exhaled in a shuddering breath. I did it, she whispered. Alaric's expression was unreadable, but the corners of his lips twitched upward in approval. Yes, you did. That night, as the training grounds grew silent and the night air chilled, a shadow approached the Vexwood estate. Alaric and Selene were in the library, reviewing plans when a soft knock echoed on the door. Dorian entered first, his face pale and tight with worry. There's someone at the gates, he said, his voice low. A messenger. He's not one of ours. Alaric stood immediately. Who is it? I don't know, but he's wearing the insignia of the Shadow Court. Selene froze. The Shadow Court? Alaric's jaw tightened. Kyle's allies. They specialize in dark magic. Dorian turned on his heel. We need to go. Now, they rushed to the gates, where a cloaked figure stood, his face hidden in shadow. Without waiting for permission, the figure spoke in a voice that made Selene's spine stiffen. Alaric Vexwood, I come with a message from Kyle Corvin. He's ready to move forward with the war, and he wants Selene. Now. Alaric's eyes narrowed, his hands curling into fists. Tell Kyle, he'll get nothing from me. The figure smirked. We shall see. The clock is ticking, Alpha. Chapter 10. The war begins. Selene stood beside Alaric at the Grand Vexwood Estate's entrance, the cool night air brushing against her skin, the scent of earth and wood mingling with the tension that crackled in the air. She could feel it. A storm was approaching, not just from the skies, but from Kyle and the war he was determined to wage. "Do you really think Kyle would attack now?" she asked, voice barely more than a whisper, though her heart raced with each passing second. The calm before a battle was always the hardest. Alaric's gaze was unwavering as he stared into the dark distance beyond the gates, his posture rigid, like a lion preparing to pounce. His jaw clenched. He's more cunning than that. He'll play his game carefully, but make no mistake, Kale isn't just after you, Selene. He wants to break the entire Vexwood lineage. Selene's heart skipped a beat. The entire Vexwood lineage? That sounded like much more than just a marriage contract. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alaric turned his steely gaze to her, his expression softening just slightly, but there was something hard in his eyes that made her stomach flip. "It means that he's going to try and take everything, the estate, the power, the legacy of the Vexwood pack. All of it is in jeopardy." Selene swallowed hard, fear mingling with her own instincts. A surge of power pulsed in her veins, a reminder of the phoenix flame that lived within her. She wasn't just an innocent bystander in this game. She was a weapon, a pawn in a much larger scheme, and if Kyle had anything to do with it, she would be a target. A dark shape appeared on the horizon, the first signs of Kyle's forces approaching. The messenger had left them with the chilling message, but now they were on the precipice of action. Alaric didn't take his eyes off the figure that had emerged from the trees, not even when Selene stepped closer to him, her hand brushing against his. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't let go. "It's time," Alaric murmured. "We prepare for war." The sound of armored boots grew louder, and soon enough, the shadows turned into the unmistakable forms of Kyle's men, bearing the insignia of the Shadow Court. The cloaked figures were silent, moving like ghosts through the trees, their eyes glowing faintly with dark magic. A chill ran through Selene's spine. She had always been told the Shadow Court was a myth, a whispered legend, but now it was real, and their dark power seeped into the land like poison. "Are you ready?" Alaric's voice broke through her thoughts. He turned to her, his gaze filled with a rare vulnerability, but also an urgency she hadn't seen in him before. Selene nodded, the fire inside her rising to meet the coming battle. She was ready, or at least she would be. "Keep your head," he continued, his voice turning commanding once more. "Do not let your emotions control you. You are not just my wife anymore. You are the future of this pack, and you need to believe in yourself." Her heart pounded at his words. The future of this pack. She wasn't just his wife. She was more. Her role in the Vexwood legacy had never felt more real than it did in that moment. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Alaric's lips twitched into the barest of smiles before he turned back toward the advancing army. The clash of steel against steel echoed through the Vexwood grounds as Alaric's men rushed to meet the Shadow Court's forces. Selene had never seen a battle like this before. It was savage and primal, a testament to the sheer ferocity of the werewolves. The sounds of snarls and growls filled the night, the air thick with the scent of blood and magic. Selene stood on the sidelines with Alaric, her eyes scanning the chaos. She could feel the burn of the phoenix flame inside her, its energy crackling, urging her to join the fray. But Alaric held her back with a firm hand on her arm. "Not yet," he growled under his breath. "You need to keep your focus." Her fingers flexed involuntarily, flames licking at her fingertips. She could feel the heat building, could almost taste the power. It was so tempting to unleash it, to show them what she was capable of. But she remembered Alaric's words. Control. The war raged around them, and the battle was starting to tip in favor of Kyle's forces. The Shadow Court was relentless, their dark magic adding another layer of danger to the fight. Selene's heart raced as the battle lines began to shift. Alaric's forces were beginning to falter. "There are too many," she muttered, her fear rising. "No," Alaric said, his voice low and steady. "They're too weak." He waved his hand, and suddenly a shimmering barrier surrounded them. The magic was strong, but the fire in Selene's chest pulsed with a new intensity. "This is where it ends," Alaric said, a dark glint in his eyes. Now is the time to strike. Alaric took a step forward, and Selene felt the call to action deep within her bones. This was it. This was her moment to prove that she wasn't just some fragile human woman caught in the middle of a pack's power struggle. She was more. She drew a deep breath and focused all of her energy on the flames inside her. The power grew, thrumming through her body, heating her from the inside out. With one sharp motion, she lifted her hand toward the heart of the battle. A wave of fire erupted from her fingertips, cascading outward, transforming the battlefield. The flames surged forward, burning away the dark magic of the Shadow Court, leaving their forces stunned and disoriented. The sight of her power caused a ripple of fear through Kyle army. They weren't prepared for the Phoenix Flame. They hadn't counted on it. But in that moment of triumph, Selene felt a sharp, unnatural pull, a cold presence. She turned to look, and her breath hitched in her throat. It was Kyle. Kyle stood at the edge of the battlefield, his dark eyes glowing with malice. His form was shadowed, his silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of the raging flames. But there was something else there, something far more dangerous, a shape beside him. Dorian. Selene's heart dropped into her stomach. No, she whispered, Dorian, the loyal advisor. The one who had been by Alaric's side for years. He was the last person she had expected to see there, standing with Kyle, his expression unreadable. Alaric's gaze followed hers, and when he saw Dorian, his face darkened in a flash of recognition. No, he growled. No, it can't be. I knew it was you, Selene said under her breath, the words laced with disbelief. He betrayed you, Alaric. Alaric's eyes narrowed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Dorian's role has always been to keep me in the dark. But now, it seems his true loyalty lies with Kyle. Dorian stepped forward, his voice cold and calculating. You were never meant to rule, Alaric. Your time is over. The Shadow Court will have what it seeks. And this pack will be mine. Chapter 11, Shadows of Betrayal. Selene's mind raced as Dorian stepped forward, a chill in the air that wasn't just from the night, but from the realization of the betrayal. Dorian had always been Alaric's trusted right hand, the one who held the pack's secrets, the one who had helped Alaric rise to power. How could he be here, standing with Kyle, the very enemy they had fought for so long? Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the two men lock eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Kyle's lips curled into a smirk, his dark magnetic presence like a shadow creeping over the battlefield. But it wasn't Kyle that had struck the deepest blow. It was Dorian, the man who had been by Alaric's side for so long. I thought you were loyal. Alaric's voice was low, a growl laced with disbelief. His normally commanding tone faltered, a crack of vulnerability slipping through. Dorian's cold smile never wavered as he faced Alaric. Loyalty is earned, not demanded, Alaric, and you lost it a long time ago. Selene's throat tightened, a feeling of dread curling in her stomach. The weight of Dorian's words hit her like a heavy blow. She had seen the way he had interacted with Alaric, always with respect, always with care. But now it was clear that all of it had been a facade, a well-crafted mask. Dorian, why? Alaric's voice cracked with the rawness of the question. It was a plea, an acknowledgement of the deep betrayal. Dorian shrugged, as if the years of loyalty meant nothing. You were never meant to rule, Alaric. You were too weak, too emotional. Kyle understands the true nature of power. He'll take this pack to new heights. A sudden, horrifying realization hit Selene. Kyle was after more than just power. He wanted to reshape everything. The Vexwood legacy, the pack, and all of their lives. Alaric stepped forward, his gaze hardening as he locked eyes with Dorian. You're a fool, Dorian. You've turned your back on everything we've built. And for what? Power? Revenge? Dorian's smile widened, his eyes flickering with dark satisfaction. It's not about revenge, Alaric. It's about truth. You've always been too wrapped up in this idea of honor, of loyalty. But this world? It's built on ambition and blood. Kyle understands that. He's the future. As the last of his words hung in the air, Alaric's rage flared, his wolf pushing at the surface. The air around them thickened with the weight of his emotions, his power palpable. But just as he was about to unleash his fury, Selene stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Stop, she said, her voice strong despite the tremble of uncertainty in her heart. She turned to Dorian, her eyes narrowing. What did you promise him, Dorian? What could he possibly offer you that you didn't already have? Dorian's eyes flicked to her, a flash of something, anger, frustration, before he turned his gaze back to Alaric. The same thing I've always wanted, Selene. Power, true control. Alaric's fists clenched at his sides, his eyes flickering toward Selene with a silent plea. But this time, it wasn't just for him. It was for the pack, for the legacy they had both worked so hard to protect. Then you've made a grave mistake, Alaric said, his voice like thunder. Kyle can't be trusted. And neither can you. The battle on the front lines raged on as Kyle's forces clashed with Alaric's pack. The air was thick with the scent of blood, the sounds of growls and screams, and the crackle of magic. Selene could feel the tension building, the chaotic energy of the battle seeping into her veins, urging her to act. She had always felt the pull of the phoenix flame inside her, but now, as the stakes grew higher, the power surged to the surface. Alaric's gaze flickered to the chaos unfolding beyond them, and he gave a sharp nod. Selene, stay close. This battle isn't over yet. We can't let Kyle win. She nodded, but the power inside her was rising like a storm. Her senses sharpened, every muscle in her body attuned to the violence unfolding around them. She could feel the pull of the flame, a call that would only grow stronger the more she allowed herself to tap into it. It was a dangerous game, one she wasn't sure she was ready to play. I can help, she said, the words escaping her before she could fully think them through. Alaric turned to her, his expression dark. No. Not yet. We need to fight strategically. If you use your power now, it could make things worse. Selene's jaw tightened. She understood the stakes, but her instincts were screaming at her to act, to take control of the situation. Trust me, she said, her voice low but firm. I won't let you down. Alaric hesitated, his gaze flicking between her and the battlefield. Finally, with a reluctant nod, he stepped back. Be careful, he warned, his voice full of something close to desperation. And don't let the fire consume you. With a deep breath, Selene closed her eyes, centering herself. She had felt the pull of the phoenix flame since the moment she'd stepped into this world. It was part of her, a power born from something ancient and untamed. But now, with Dorian's betrayal and Kyle's forces advancing, she knew there was no turning back. The fire roared to life inside her as she raised her hand, her fingers crackling with energy. The flame surged outward, a torrent of power that burned through the darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest as the fire tore through the air, a brilliant wall of heat and light. She could feel the energy of the battle shifting around her. Kyle's dark magic recoiling against the brilliance of the phoenix flame. The ground beneath her feet shook as the flame spread, sweeping through the battlefield and disintegrating Kyle's soldiers. The sheer intensity of the magic was enough to send shockwaves through the air, sending a clear message to Kyle and his forces. You're not welcome here. But just as she thought the battle was tipping in her favor, a sudden, bone-chilling presence broke through the flames. Kyle stood at the edge of the battlefield, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that sent a shiver down Selene's spine. You think this is your victory? Kyle's voice was like ice, cutting through the chaos. You haven't seen anything yet. Selene's heart skipped a beat. Kyle wasn't done. He hadn't even shown his true power. With a flick of his wrist, Kyle called upon the shadows that had been creeping around the edges of the battlefield. Dark tendrils of magic snaked toward Selene, wrapping around her, their cold touch making her skin crawl. Alaric, she gasped, but the words were lost in the crackling chaos. Kyle smirked, his power growing stronger. You can wield fire, Selene, but can you control the shadows? Selene's breath quickened as the dark magic closed in around her, tightening with every passing second. It was as if the shadows were alive, pressing in on her, suffocating her. The phoenix flame flared within her, but it was losing ground against Kyle's dark magic. Alaric charged forward, his eyes wild with desperation, but it was too late. Kyle had already made his move. You've made a deal with the devil, Dorian, Alaric spat, his voice filled with rage. And now, you'll see what happens when you betray me. Dorian's eyes flickered with uncertainty for just a moment before he nodded to Kyle. It's done, he said, his voice cold. Chapter 12. The Shattered Alliance. The world seemed to slow down around Selene as the dark tendrils of Kyle's magic wrapped tighter around her. The air grew cold, unnaturally cold, and the flames of her phoenix power flickered like a candle in a storm, fighting desperately against the suffocating pull of Kyl's dark magic. She could feel her connection to the flame weakening, the shadows coiling around her with a malicious intelligence that sent a cold shiver down her spine. No, she thought, gritting her teeth, I will not let him win. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she struggled to break free. Her vision blurred, and for a moment it seemed as if the darkness was swallowing her whole, consuming her very being. Kyl's laughter echoed through the chaos of the battlefield, taunting her. Foolish little phoenix, Kyle sneered, his voice smooth and mocking. You think you can stand against the ancient power of the shadows. I've waited centuries for this moment, and you are nothing more than a spark in the darkness. The tendrils of Kyl's dark magic tightened, drawing closer to her. She could feel the chill of them creeping into her skin, into her bones, freezing her from the inside out. But even as they closed in, something within her flared. The phoenix flame, the fire that had always been with her, that ancient power, pushed back. It fought against the shadows, a battle of light and darkness that surged within her like a tempest. But the shadows were relentless. Kyle stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. You were always going to be the one to bring me what I wanted. You and Alaric, so weak, so full of idealism. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. Selene's heart pounded in her chest as she forced herself to focus. She had to break free. She couldn't allow Kyle to win. Not now, not after everything they had fought for. The thought of Alaric's disappointment, the weight of all the lives depending on her, burned within her. Think, Selene, you're stronger than this. Her mind raced, her pulse thundering in her ears. She had always been told that the phoenix flame was a power of rebirth, of resurrection, but she had never truly understood it, until now. The flame wasn't just destructive, it could heal, it could regenerate, and that's what she needed to do. Summoning every ounce of strength, Selene closed her eyes and reached within herself, feeling the flicker of the flame at her core. Her body was trembling, but the fire, it was there. It's always been there. With a sharp inhale, she ignited the flame inside her, pushing it outward. The fire roared to life, surging through her veins like liquid heat, flooding her senses with its intensity. The shadows recoiled, the dark magic screaming in protest as her phoenix power burst from her in a blaze of light. For a moment, everything was drowned in brilliance, a burst of light so bright it swallowed the darkness whole. The tendrils of shadow writhed and shrieked, disintegrating into nothingness. Kyle's smug expression faltered as the light engulfed him, but just as quickly, the light dimmed, and the flames began to flicker again. Is that all you have? Kyle's voice came through the darkness, thick with derision. He stepped forward, unaffected by the power of the phoenix flame that had just surged through her. Alaric's voice cut through the tension, full of authority. Selene, don't listen to him. He's trying to break you. Her heart raced at the sound of his voice, and a surge of energy pushed through her. She hadn't realized how much she needed him, how much his presence fueled her. The thought of him, of their bond, gave her the strength to push back. She opened her eyes and faced Kyle with renewed determination. No, she said, her voice firm, unyielding. You're not the only one who can control the shadows. From behind her, Alaric's growl cut through the air like a weapon. He was moving swiftly, his form a blur as he barreled toward Kyle. His eyes were filled with rage, but also something else, something deeper, a fierce protectiveness. His wolf was unleashed, its power swirling around him as he leaped into the fray. Kyle! Alaric roared. You've gone too far! Kyle looked unfazed as he turned toward Alaric, the smirk never leaving his lips. You should have stayed out of this, Alaric. Now it's too late. But Alaric wasn't backing down. He was like a force of nature, charging at Kyle with the raw power of his wolf. The air around him shimmered with the intensity of his presence, his wolf shifting beneath the surface. I'll never let you take what's ours, Alaric growled, his voice low and dangerous. The two men collided in a storm of violence, a blur of claws and magic as the power of both alpha wolves clashed. The earth trembled beneath their feet as they fought, Alaric with the full force of his pack's loyalty behind him, and Kyle with the dark magic that ran through his veins. But even as Alaric and Kyle battled, the true fight was still with Selene. The phoenix flame inside her surged again, a radiant light that clashed against the shadows Kyle had summoned. She could feel the struggle within her, the tug of war between light and dark. But she wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for Alaric, for their pack, for the future they had promised each other. She closed her eyes, focusing once more. The power surged again, but this time she wasn't alone. Alaric's voice, low and powerful, rumbled through the chaos. "We're in this together, Selene." And with that, a surge of energy coursed through her. A wave of fire and light that merged with Alaric's power. The flames of the phoenix and the raw might of the alpha collided, forming an unbreakable bond that washed over the battlefield. The shadows recoiled in fear as the light intensified, burning through everything Kyle had created. Kyle's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, this can't be!" The power of the phoenix flame and the alpha's rage together was too much for Kyle. His dark magic began to unravel, the tendrils of shadow flickering and dissipating under the force of the combined power. With a final, anguished scream, Kyle's form was engulfed in the light, his body dissolving into the ether as the shadows around him were obliterated. The battlefield was eerily silent as the last of Kyle's dark magic faded into nothingness. Alaric stood, panting, his body still crackling with energy, his eyes locked on Selene. There was an expression on his face, one of relief, yes, but also something deeper, something that spoke of a bond forged in fire and blood. Selene's heart raced as she turned to face him. She felt the burn of her own power still flickering inside her, but it was softer now, calmer. The tension in the air began to dissipate, the threat that Kyle posed now gone, but the damage had been done. Selene's eyes flicked to Dorian, who stood off to the side, watching with a calculating gaze. The betrayal still hung between them like a storm cloud. Alaric stepped forward, his eyes filled with an intensity that matched the fire of the phoenix flame. "Dorian," he said, his voice hard as stone, "you'll pay for this." Dorian's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of victory. "I always knew you would say that, Alaric," he said softly, almost wistfully. "But remember this, no one is untouchable." And with that, Dorian turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the wreckage of the battlefield and the broken trust between him and Alaric. Chapter 13. The Alpha's Claim. The morning after the battle, Selene awoke to the scent of rain-soaked earth and burnt ozone, her lashes fluttering open to a soft gray dawn filtering through the shattered windows of the Thornhold estate's east wing. The battlefield outside was quiet now, no screams, no crackling magic, no growls in the air, only the faint chirp of birds hesitant to return. Her muscles ached, her wrists, raw from being bound by Kyle's shadow magic, throbbed with a dull pain. Every breath she took was a reminder that she had survived. The phoenix within her stirred, exhausted, but alive. "Don't move," a deep voice murmured from beside her. Selene turned her head slightly and found Alaric seated at the edge of the massive bed, shirtless, blood dried at the corner of his mouth, his shoulder bandaged and seeping red. His hand, large and steady, rested on her thigh with the unconscious protectiveness of someone whose soul had only just been returned. "You nearly died," he growled. "Again." "Third time's the charm," Selene rasped, voice hoarse. Despite himself, a small, reluctant smile ghosted across his lips. Alaric poured her a glass of water and helped her sit up. The movement brought them nose to nose, too close for someone who wasn't used to touching or tenderness. But neither of them flinched this time. Selene drank slowly, eyes locked on his. When she finished, he didn't move away. "You scared me," he admitted. That surprised her. Alaric Thorn was not a man who admitted to fear. I thought I was going to lose you before I even figured out what you were to me." She blinked. "What I was to you. You're my mate," he said simply. Her breath caught in her throat. "I didn't want to believe it before. I thought it was too messy, that I could just keep things strictly business between us. Contract, alliance, nothing more." He clenched his jaw. "But I can't." Selene swallowed hard, the gravity of his confession hitting her harder than Kyle's magic ever had. "And now?" she whispered. He leaned in, brushing her temple with his lips in a kiss so soft, it set her whole body alight. "Now," he said, "I protect you with every part of me. Contract be damned." Later that morning, the council chamber was chaos. Shifters from allied packs were streaming in, half of them injured, all of them furious. Dorian had disappeared. Kale's death left a power vacuum in the rogue factions, and Selene, the supposed outsider, the flame princess of no known pack, was now being hailed as the weapon that saved them all. Alaric stood tall beside her, his voice booming through the ancient stone hall. "The war is not over," he declared. "Kyle is dead, but the forces behind him are still moving. And Dorian betrayed not just me, but all of you." The council erupted in growls and snarls. Selene, still weak but standing proudly at Alaric's side, raised a hand for silence. "I'm not one of you," she began, "but I fought for this pack. I bled for it. And I have no intention of running from this war. If you'll have me, I want to help rebuild. Protect what Kyle tried to destroy." A silence settled. Then a single voice rose from the crowd. "She's not pack," an older beta growled. "She's a flame-born outsider. Can we trust her?" Alaric's voice was low, lethal. "She's mine." Every head turned. Alaric stepped forward, pulling Selene close with a possessive grip on her waist. "She's my mate, my bond. Challenge her and you challenge me." The room stilled. Challenge an alpha's claim and you risked death. No one spoke. That night, back in the privacy of Alaric's quarters, Selene stood at the hearth, staring into the fire. He watched her from across the room. There was tension between them, not anger but something unspoken. She turned to him, holding out the original marriage contract. "I think it's time we burned this," she said softly. He crossed the room slowly, took the parchment from her, and without hesitation, threw it into the fire. The flames devoured it instantly. "No more contracts," he murmured. "No more pretending," she agreed. They were chest to chest now. She looked up into his eyes, those wild gold irises flickering in the firelight. His hand slid to the small of her back. "I don't want you because of duty," he said. "I want you because when I look at you, I see everything I didn't know I needed." She reached up, fingers curling in his shirt. "Then show me," she whispered. And he did. He kissed her like a man who had nothing left to lose. Fiercely, slowly, with reverence and hunger. Their lips met again and again as they tumbled back onto the bed. This time, not for protection or strategy, but because they wanted each other. Clothes vanished. The tension that had simmered between them since their first meeting finally shattered, and when he claimed her, it wasn't ruthless. It was tender, reverent, and full of all the emotions he'd never dared voice. Selene cried out as his mark sank into her shoulder, bonding them in truth. The fire within her burned white hot, but this time it wasn't destruction. It was rebirth. Chapter 14, The Aftermath of the Mark. The first morning after the bond was sealed didn't begin with fanfare or declarations. It began with silence. Not the kind that bred discomfort or unspoken tension. No. This was a quieter intimacy, the type shared between two people who had survived war and bled for each other, now finally allowed the space to breathe. Alaric lay propped on one elbow, his golden eyes not glowing with alpha fury for once, but watching Selene sleep with an awe he tried not to acknowledge. The delicate lines of her face were relaxed, lashes dusting high cheekbones, her lips slightly parted in sleep. His mark glowed faintly on her shoulder where his canines had broken skin. The bite wasn't grotesque. It shimmered faintly in the early light like molten gold, proof of their bond, magical in its own right. Faded. It still surprised him. He, Alaric Thorn, the ruthless alpha billionaire who couldn't stand social obligation, who kept women at a distance with a glare, alone, had chosen to mark a woman who once mocked his custom suits, and called his security team fashion-forward wolves with trust issues, and he'd do it again. She stirred. "Staring at me while I sleep, Thorn?" Selene murmured, voice raspier than usual, worn from battle and moaning. Bit possessive. He leaned down and kissed her shoulder just below the mark. "You marked yourself on my soul. I figured it's only fair." She blinked open her eyes and laughed, a breathy, startled sound. "Are you flirting with me? Is this real life?" He smirked. "Don't get used to it. It's just post-battle delirium." Selene stretched, every movement feline. She sat up, the silk sheet falling slightly to expose the mark, and the deep bruises down her back from yesterday's magical duel. He was on his feet instantly. "You're still injured," he said, already rummaging for a salve from the ornate nightstand drawer. "I'm fine," she argued. "You're not," he replied firmly. "Now turn around. Always so bossy in the mornings?" "You chose this alpha, sunshine." She snorted but obeyed, sitting with her back to him, as he gently traced the bruises with warm fingers and then carefully applied a glowing herbal paste. His touch was softer than she expected, reverent. They said nothing for a while, until Selene murmured, "So, we're mates now." "We are," he confirmed, continuing his task. She hesitated, then turned her head slightly. "Do you regret it?" His hands stilled. He moved around to face her, crouching so they were eye to eye. "Selene Day, if I could do it again, I'd still mark you, only sooner." Her chest tightened. Then, never one to let a moment get too sentimental, she added, "Even if I snore and hog the covers?" His lips curved. "Especially then. You fight even in your sleep." Alpha material, clearly. The Thornhold dining hall had never been louder. Now that the immediate threat of Kyle had been removed, the entire estate was alive with shifters from every corner of the territory. Young wolves, old advisors, war-weary betas, and even a few wandering rogues seeking amnesty under the Thornhold crest. Everyone wanted to see her. The human-turned-alpha's mate, the flameborn witch, the woman who'd shattered Kyle's spell with nothing but fire and fury. Selene, of course, hated every second of it. Alaric had warned her before they entered, "Stay close to me. They respect you, but they don't know what to make of you yet." She wore a simple high-neck cream sweater and black slacks. Not her usual dramatic aesthetic, but she didn't want to give the elders more to whisper about. Still, she walked in beside Alaric with her chin up and her spine straight. The room fell silent. The young twins from the Red Fang pack gasped audibly. "Is that her mark? I heard she fought barefoot with a phoenix behind her." She blew up the west wing with her hands. Selene sighed and muttered under her breath, "Great, now I'm a bloody campfire story." Alaric suppressed a chuckle and guided her to the alpha table. Councilman Vren, a stoic older wolf with scars across his jaw, gave her a once-over. "You look stronger than yesterday." "She also made my bathroom smell like burnt magic and lavender," Alaric added. "Shut up, Thorn," she muttered. The beta next to Vren leaned in, blinking. "You were flameborn? What lineage?" Selene shrugged. "Don't know. My mother died when I was young. No records. I was just an orphan with a temper." Vren eyed her. "That temper saved your alpha," she blinked. For once she didn't have a comeback. After breakfast, the two found themselves walking the estate gardens, where wolves and humans alike gathered for planning sessions and healing rituals. Selene glanced at Alaric. "So, now that we're officially bound by fate, do I get to redecorate your entire estate?" Alaric gave her a long look. "Only if you remove that hideous gold lamp in your room." Her eyes widened in mock horror. "Excuse me, that is a vintage French import from a haunted antique shop in Prague. Of course it is." "Alaric," she grinned, "you wound me, you'll survive." A messenger interrupted them. Young, gangly, clearly terrified of his own shadow, Alpha Thorn. There's word." Dorian was seen heading west, toward the Witchline Mountains. Alaric's expression darkened. "He won't get far." Selene's smile faded. "You think he'll try to raise what Kyle failed to finish?" "I think Dorian was always working for something older than Kyle." "Older?" she asked. "What's older than Kyle?" He hesitated. "I think we're about to find out." Chapter 15. The Heart of the Alpha. The Witchline Mountains weren't on any official map. They hovered in legend and memory, nestled beyond Thornhold's western border, a jagged, snow-kissed range cloaked in perpetual twilight. Even when the sun shone bright elsewhere, the veil between worlds grew thin here. Magic thrummed beneath the stone. Selene stood at the mouth of the pass, her breath misting in the sharp air, cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her palm rested on Alaric's bare forearm. He stood beside her, shirtless despite the cold, marked now by fresh scars and faded claw marks from the battle at Thornhold. "It's a trap," she said softly. "Dorian wants us to come. He'll get his wish," Alaric replied, voice steel and frost. She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "What if I lose control again?" He met her gaze head-on. "Then I'll pull you back." Her chest rose and fell. "You said that before." "And I meant it then. I mean it now." She nodded slowly, then cracked a smirk. "Still bossy. You chose this, Alpha, remember?" Before they could cross the threshold, Selene pulled something from her cloak, a small charm, metal twisted with rune marks. I made this in the library last night, she said. It's infused with protective fire, a little magical insurance in case things go sideways. Alaric arched a brow. You've been holding out on me. I didn't want to make your ego worse. They shared a brief smile. It was fleeting, but real. Then, together, they stepped into the mountains. Dorian stood in the heart of a stone circle etched with blood and bone. He wasn't alone. Behind him loomed a figure wrapped in blackened shadow, face obscured, but its presence, wrong and ancient, sank into the earth like rot in the veins of a tree. I told you they'd come, Dorian hissed, half mad, half ecstatic, the alpha and his little witch bride. You disappoint me, Dorian, the figure intoned. You promised me the fire-blooded one. She's here. She came. You lost Kyle. You lost the armies. You failed. Dorian's eyes widened. No, wait. I can bring her to you. I can... But the shadow was already moving, its presence vanishing on the wind like smoke. Selene could feel the shift in the air before they even crested the ridge. A dark pulse, a beckoning. The ancient force Alaric feared, something older than Kyle, older than the packs themselves, was awakening. She pressed her hand to her chest, where the mark burned faintly. He's here, she whispered, not Dorian. They didn't wait. The battle began not with swords but with magic and moonlight. Selene unleashed walls of fire across the ground, carving pathways for Alaric's wolves. Alaric shifted mid-air, fur black as pitch, eyes glowing, and tore through Dorian's makeshift army of corrupted shifters. The sound of fangs, the hiss of flame, screams in the trees. At the heart of it all, Dorian laughed. I told you she was dangerous, he shrieked. You mark her and now the old magic wakes. You doomed us all. Alaric threw him to the ground. Say another word and I'll end you slowly. But Selene stepped between them. No, she said. He's mine. Dorian smiled through broken teeth. Do it, little witch. Prove you're no better. Selene stared down at him, flame building in her hands. Then she turned away. I don't need to destroy you, she said. You've already done it to yourself. The flames curled around her fingers and vanished. In the silence after battle, Alaric found her sitting on a cliffside, knees pulled to her chest, her hands still glowing faintly from residual magic. He sat beside her. You let him live. I had to. He nodded. That's what makes you stronger than me. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars bleed into the horizon. She turned her head. You never answered my question. He arched a brow. Which one? If you truly want this marriage to be more than a contract. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he took her hand and pressed something into her palm. A ring. Forged of obsidian and fire gold. Ancient, beautiful, and unmistakably Thornhold. I don't want a contract, he said, voice raw. I want forever. Tears gathered in her eyes. I think I'm ready for that. Chapter 16. Luna's Rise and the Bachelor's Revolt. The castle had never looked like this. Gone were the sharp shadows, the halls echoing with cold footsteps. Now Thornhold thrummed with life. Wolves howled, not in rage or pain, but in celebration. Pack banners fluttered in the wind. The courtyards had been cleaned, repaired, and filled with laughing shifters. Little pups darted between warriors' legs, and elder wolves huffed indulgently on stone benches, retelling the story of how Selene, the reluctant witch, had turned Dorian's cursed army into smoke and ash. Selene watched it all from the high balcony, a mug of strong Thornhold brew in her hands, and a faint crease in her brow. I think they're planning to erect a statue of you, came a familiar voice behind her. She didn't turn. They should build one of you shirtless. It would definitely boost tourism. Alaric stepped into the light, robes open at the collar, hair slightly damp from the ritual bath he'd just taken. Are you suggesting I exploit my body for political gain? Selene turned, arching a brow. Isn't that what this whole marriage started as? Fair. He moved to stand beside her. But that's not what it's become. She stared out at the wolves gathering below. Her magic pulsed softly beneath her skin. They expect me to be a Luna. You are a Luna. No, she whispered. They expect me to be her, some elegant, graceful goddess in white, blessing crops and healing the wounded with a flick of her wrist. Alaric's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. You melted a battalion of corrupted wolves and saved half the council with a homemade charm you crafted while stress-eating breadsticks. I'd say you're doing fine. She laughed despite herself. I hate you sometimes. I know. Selene had faced dark gods, cursed alphas, and a soul-stealing ex-boyfriend. But nothing could have prepared her for the Council of Thornhold matrimonial tradition and legacy. The name alone made her want to run. We've drafted 23 rituals for the upcoming bond ceremony, announced Elder Myrn, a sharp-nosed old wolf with a love for bureaucracy and an irrational hatred for moonflower petals. Is this the same man who accidentally cursed his own tail during the solstice rites? Selene whispered to Alaric. Shh. He has a surprisingly accurate sense of hearing. Myrn narrowed his eyes. As I was saying, we'll begin with the Luna's oath of obedience. Nope, Selene said, raising a hand. Silence. I don't do oaths of obedience. I do fiery sarcasm, occasional sarcasm, and public displays of magical frustration. Alaric cleared his throat. Selene speaks for us both. The bond ceremony will be ours, not a relic of dead wolves' traditions. Myrn huffed. At this rate, you'll have a mating ceremony featuring wine, kissing, and an awkward speech from your ex. Selene brightened. Actually, that doesn't sound half bad. The pack's unmated males, especially the younger ones, had started a quiet resistance movement. It began with stolen portraits of Selene that had been distributed across the lesser villages. She's wasted on him, growled one. I heard she turned a vampire inside out with one finger. I heard she set fire to his office when he tried to cancel their wedding cake tasting, said another. I heard she kissed him in the war room and he blushed, said a third. Jealousy was in full bloom. And so, the coalition of available yet emotionally stable bachelor wolves was born. They met weekly in secret, wrote poems in her honor, and occasionally attempted to gift her enchanted artifacts via secret admirers. She found the whole thing hilarious. Alaric did not. She's mine, he growled to Raynor after a sword training session. Tell them. Maybe if you said I love you out loud once in a while, they'd get the message. I grunted meaningfully at her yesterday. That's not the same thing. I clenched her hand. You need therapy. The night before the Luna ceremony, Selene found Alaric standing alone in the great hall. The moonlight painted him in pale silver. He looked unguarded. Mortal. She stepped forward quietly. You're doing that broody thing again. He turned to face her. I thought I'd lost you, he said simply. You almost did. I thought the magic would consume you, that you'd choose it instead of me. Selene stepped close. I didn't choose one over the other. I chose both. I chose me. He nodded slowly. She touched his cheek. And you. He didn't speak, just pulled her close. Their kiss was slow, deep, and unhurried, like two warriors laying down their weapons. She broke it first. You smell like pine and brooding. You smell like magic and smartassery. They kissed again. As dawn approached, the castle transformed into something out of a dream. Wolves lined the stone halls. Elders donned their ceremonial cloaks. Torches flickered. Music began, low and ancient, drawn from the bloodlines of their kind. Selene stood in a moon-silver gown, her dark hair cascading down her back. Magic pulsed in the jewels at her wrists, not because they were enchanted, but because they'd been forged with her fire and Alaric's blood. She wasn't just being married, she was taking her rightful place. When she stepped into the great hall, silence fell. Even the air dared not move. Alaric stood at the far end, wearing dark ceremonial robes lined with gold. His chest rose and fell once as he watched her. Not just watched, devoured. She walked to him. No one else mattered. When she reached him, she took his hand. No more contracts, she whispered. No more cages, he replied. The binding began, not with spoken oaths, but with blood and magic. Two halves becoming whole. Chapter 17. The Alpha's Mate, the Luna's Flame. There was no priest, no pastor, no elder standing between them. Only the moon, the fire, and their bare feet on the stone circle etched by generations of alphas before them. Selene's silver gown swept behind her, glittering with embedded stardust. Literal stardust, hand-forged by Raynor, who'd claimed it was payment for not revealing Alaric's love poems. Her hair hung in inky waves down her back, laced with moonvine blossoms that shimmered whenever her pulse quickened. Alaric stood opposite her, stripped of titles, of command, of power. In this sacred rite he was not king, not alpha, just hers. His dark robes had been cast aside. He stood bare-chested, tribal markings from his bloodline curling across his torso, lines that began to glow the moment she stepped into the circle. A hush fell over the pack. From the highest balconies to the outermost hills, every wolf was watching, waiting. Pack tradition dictated that the Alpha and Luna mark each other, not as a symbol of dominance, but of choice. She offered her neck first. He hesitated. "You don't have to," he whispered. "You never have to do anything that makes you feel, I want it," she said. So he leaned in, lips brushing skin, before his teeth sank gently, reverently, into the crook of her neck. The pain was fleeting, the pleasure after, unexpected. It sizzled through her, pulling a gasp from her throat, and magic burst from her chest in a shock wave that rolled through the entire valley like a heartbeat. The sky rippled, stars blinked, and when Selene turned her eyes to Alaric, she saw everything. Not just the man, not just the Alpha, but him, the boy who once stood alone in the woods with blood on his hands and thought himself cursed, the beast who believed he'd never be worthy of love, the king who gave her a contract and accidentally handed her his heart. Her own mark appeared on his shoulder a moment later, glowing silver. It would never fade, not even in death. Just when the celebration began, cheers, music, howling from the mountaintops, a sound split the air. Crack! A fissure opened in the sky. Purple lightning streaked down, striking the old stone altar in the courtyard. Gasps, screams, then silence, and from the lightning, a woman stepped forth, tall, otherworldly, cloaked in shadow with eyes like obsidian mirrors. Selene's spine straightened. "That's not a witch." "No," Alaric said darkly. "That's a god." The figure looked at Selene. "So you are the Flameborn, the one who changed fate. You were never meant to survive the bond." Selene's hand gripped her blade. "Then I guess fate is going to be very disappointed." The figure smiled and vanished. The crack sealed, the lightning faded. Alaric exhaled. What the hell was that? Raynor appeared, hair singed, looking smug. "So, funny story. Remember how the bloodline curse was actually divine punishment from an ancient deity bound to Thornhold?" Selene blinked. "No. Right. I was going to mention that. But then you guys got all kissy and stuff, Raynor. Anyway, no big deal. We just awakened her. She's apparently watching us now, forever, judging our life choices. Especially yours, Alaric, of course." Selene groaned. "Gods are so nosy." Epilogue. 3 months later. "Alaric, the pup ate my moonstone wand again." Alaric looked up from the table where he was reviewing treaty documents. "Which pup?" "The black one that looks like a demon and smells like burnt toast." "Luna," came a voice from the kitchen. "That's your familiar." "Oh, right," he chuckled, setting the papers aside. "Come here." She stomped into the room, hair wild, cheeks flushed. "This castle is chaos. The elders keep trying to sneak fertility charms into our food. Raynor is teaching the village kids how to duel. I caught 3 junior warriors drawing abs on your training portraits. Do you need me to handle anything?" She exhaled. "No. I just needed to scream. Then scream, wife." She smiled wickedly. And screamed. Outside, 2 birds fell out of the sky. Later that night, wrapped in furs, nestled together in front of the fire, Selene looked over at him. "I love you, you know." Alaric blinked. "I thought I was a ruthless alpha who brooded too much and couldn't cook eggs without burning them." "You are, but you're my ruthless alpha." He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And you're my fire-wielding, chaos-inducing, sarcasm-loving Luna." Outside, the moon hung high over Thornhold, and in the warmth of that firelit room, surrounded by magic, wolves, and far too many enchanted teacups, Selene and Alaric lived, not perfectly, but gloriously. Together. The end. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.